I come to ask you to help to win this fight. If we win it, this hardest of all fights, then, to be sure, in the future it is going to be made easier for women all over the world to win their fight when their time comes.
Hello, I'm Charlie Dobre. Welcome to Not Small Men. Let me give you a little bit of background to this 6-part series. I love women's football. When I watch a women's game, I see my town reflected more diversely in the crowd. I see women of my daughter's age on the pitch being strong, aggressive, being their whole, uninhibited selves. I see a team, at Lewes FC anyway, my club, enjoying equal importance to their male counterparts. I see hope. And that's what led me a year ago to start this docu-series project. Through Lewes, I spent over a decade involved in the women's game. I was brought into contact with it quite accidentally at first when a group of us did a community takeover of the club in 2010. I don't think I even knew Lewes had a women's team at that point, but something extraordinary happened during the 2011-12 season. Lewes Ladies, as they were then called, won their league by winning every single match but one which they drew. I was hooked. Under then manager Jackie Agnew, they were an amazing team, a hurricane of positivity in an otherwise challenging environment. They were still at that point an independent setup playing within the club, but in 2014 it was agreed they would be brought into full ownership by the overall club to enable more resourcing. Then, in October 2016, fellow board director Ed Ramsden told me his big idea. We were both due to stand for re-election to the board, and his central plank was going to be a call to equalise the resourcing and playing budgets of the women's team versus the men's. I immediately agreed, and also made my bid for re-election all about equality. For me, the penny had now fully dropped and made an unignorable crater in the ground. We were both re-elected, and finally, after months of planning, the club announced Equality FC on July the 8th, 2017, becoming the first pro or semi-pro club in the world to value and resource its women's teams equally. So, when it comes to women's football, I'm in. I'm all in. I hit my 12-year term limit at Lewes in 2022, so had to step down from the board, but my enthusiasm and belief in the women's game hasn't changed. And so, to why I've done this series. I'm worried. Numerous reports hail the growth of the game and predict multi-billion-dollar revenues, and I love that and concur with their optimistic projections. This is an extraordinary sport that has the ingredients to bring in completely new sets of supporters and customers. But what concerns me is the very real possibility that so-called market forces will drive the women's game into becoming big, yes, but nowhere near as huge as I think it can be, and worse still, that it becomes just a version of the men's game, and with it, everything that is wrong with the men's game too. In this series, you'll hear 23 interviewees from all parts of the women's game and all over the world. I wondered whether, when we heard all their opinions and advice in the same series, in the same space, would there be much agreement on the current state of the game and on a way forward? Spoiler alert, there is. Of course, there are also differences of opinion, and it goes without saying that a guest's appearance in the series is not an endorsement of my own opinions or conclusions that you'll also hear. Each episode of Not Small Men looks at a different aspect of the game. Fans, players, revenues, worldwide development, the role of men, and finally, a look at the future and what it could look like. So, let's start by meeting some match-going fans of women's football.
Have you been coming to women's football long?
I have been coming to, for a bit over a year. No, it's 2 years.
What made you start coming to women's football?
I started coming basically because people I knew came and they said it's really good and you should come along, and I've come down and I love it. I love the fact that it's when you get great football and there's none of that sort of toxic masculinity, and it's just a very, very different vibe. Less testosterone, more family based, and it's nice.
And have you previously been into men's football at all?
Yeah, I was a season ticket holder at Arsenal for years, so yeah.
Okay, and do you still go to Arsenal? Has that habit changed?
That's gone, no, but I don't live in London anymore. But also, no, I lost it. I lost interest because men's football became, it was just the plaything of global billionaires. It seems to lose touch with the point of football for me, you know.
Do you find this a good place to bring kids as well to a women's match?
Yeah, it's fantastic. Yeah, because they don't have to sit in their seat for 90 minutes. They can get up and run around and choose different places to watch the game from and stuff like that. It's not like, right, this is your seat, sit down, enjoy the game sort of thing. It's so much more relaxed. It's good fun.
So, are you here as a fan today?
We are, yeah. We're a fan of Ishbel. She plays for Exeter City.
Oh, you're a fan of Ishmael. Are you a fan of Exeter and Ishmael?
Yeah, I guess we are now. Yeah.
And so tell us about Ishmael. What position does she play?
Oh gosh, does anyone know?
Do you follow women's football generally?
I feel like I do a little bit more now. Like, definitely follow like the Lionesses, but it's nice to actually, like, it's the first time I've been to kind of like a league kind of game, and it's really nice.
And what did you think it would be like as a women's league match before you came to one?
I don't really know. I wasn't expecting like as many people, like as many fans. So it's really nice to see. Like, it's obviously a really big community thing. Like, we heard a lot of people talking about like how long they've been coming to support and stuff. So it's really nice atmosphere.
Do you come to women's football often?
We come to Lewes from time to time. We like watching Lewes.
Is Lewes is women's football? When you say you come to Lewes as opposed to women's football, what makes you come?
I like coming to watch Lewes women play football.
And have you watched any other football before coming to watch Lewes women?
Have we watched any other? Yeah, I like watching the England, the Lionesses. I like them.
As so many pieces of research have noted, the crowd at a women's game is different, diverse, of all ages, joyful. It's something players on the pitch notice too.
I would just rather be at a women's match all day, every day. I think there's just some like vulgar male supporters that like throw like inappropriate hand gestures. As a woman, you feel dead uncomfortable being in the environment. But yeah, when you're in a women, like, it's just so inclusive. Like, there's people from every different background, like men, women, gay people, straight people, children, dogs. Like, everybody goes to a women's game, so you can just, I think it's kind of like, I don't know, like a pride event. Like, you can just literally go there and just be whoever you want to be, like, because there's no judgment, And yeah, I think that's why it's become such a safe space for, people within the LGBTQ plus community, or maybe like male fans who aren't like ultra like masculine and aggressive and don't like being around like such like a hostile environment. It's a safer place for them to go and watch and enjoy sport, as opposed to, feeling like you're afraid to say something because you don't want anybody to start on you or, attack you for your opinion.
That was former player Ellie Leek. Mark Bradley has run the Fan Experience Company for over 20 years, and he and his team have attended over 4,000 men's and women's matches in 30 countries, advising clubs about what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong when it comes to fan experience.
I do think it's a different audience. I think it offers a completely different experience. It's not worse, it's not better. Personally, I there's bits of it that I do think are better than the men's game. The lack of concern, when you walk into a game, that there might be something that you don't want your child to hear. The one that I hear most of was that, the drinks available in a stadium, in a men's stadium, this actually applies a lot to non-league, look like they've been designed by the first team. So you wouldn't get an interesting gin, a decent wine, you wouldn't get Prosecco or Cava, you wouldn't get a cocktail or something like that. Why shouldn't you get that? Why should you have to drink lager and, two different flavour ciders?
Clubs are creating from scratch, or sometimes reinventing, what an ideal match day might be for the new fans of women's football, many of whom have never attended any football match before. Lee Sanders runs English Championship club Durham Women.
The place needs to be welcoming. It needs to be, friendly for friendly for everybody. Doesn't matter whether it's a home supporter or a away supporter. Treat people how you would expect them to treat yourselves.
And Juan has been to lots of women's grounds too.
I would probably go back to Man City, to be honest. Looking at the Etihad experience, it's one of the few games I've been to in women's football where there is an actual timetable of events that you can follow. So it's not just the case that you turn up and you see that there's X, Y, Z going on. Like, when to turn up to go to X place. Like, for example, there's a fan zone kind of area near the kind of the Joy Stadium, and you can go there for a certain period before the game if it's a game at the Etihad. and then you can then move on to, say, the shop. You can then move on to sort of an area outside the stadium where you can see the players enter, and there's kind of sort of a DJ and a light show that happens for the men's game as well. And then when you get into the stadium, you can expect XYZ to happen pre-match, and also seeing what kind of entertainment you can expect at half-time. So I think in a case like that, it's obviously that all the individual activations are really good, and it's great to see that. But there's this sense that because people know when to expect things, they have more opportunity to actually experience them in person, but also to kind of plan their day a little bit better. Because sometimes some really good clubs that I go to, I'll be expecting a lot of stuff, and I'll have heard really good stuff about the experience, but I'll be a little bit concerned and stressed out about doing everything in the right amount of time, or maybe missing something out that I didn't know was happening. So on the one hand, it's really good to have all these kind of stuff, but to actually tell fans in a really clear, concise manner what's going on and when is really helpful and a really big innovation.
Bettina BAER at sports marketing agency Two Circles has been conducting research into fan culture for some time.
When women's football started to grow after the Euros, or maybe not started to grow, but there was certainly a big, let's say, boom after the women's Euros in England. We started for sure to dig into demographics, started gathering data around demographics, and what we can now see from different leaks has been confirmed that the women's football fan is a bit different in terms of demographic. When it comes to gender, they skew more female in most of the data, in all of the data sets actually that we looked at, and they are slightly younger as well, an average age of I would say 34 versus 39 in men's football, or towards 40. So they're more female, they're younger. But also they differ in terms of their expectations on a game day, about a game day. They're looking for different things. They join in different setups with friends and family. They're more often attending to games in a family setting, either with children, but also with brothers, sisters.
Of course, there isn't one type of fan and one set of motivations. Let's hear from Juan, Natalie Burrell, Man United superfan, and Paul Dreisbach, who works in women's football from North America to Africa.
I was lucky enough to go and see Chelsea women on the last day of the WSL season away at Man United. I got my girlfriend's a massive Chelsea women fan, so we got the supporter coach up from Kings Meadow all the way up to Man United, and the away end was packed. It was the classic sort of corner away end at Old Trafford, and it was so pleasant, but it wasn't pleasant in a way that was kind of dull or kind of manicured or basically kind of lacking colour. It was full of people singing songs endlessly. I mean, I joined in with plenty of them as well, and they were all kind of sort of classic sort of football chants and songs, obviously adapted for the situation, but with all of that kind of sort of unpleasant nastiness stripped away from it. And that was quite an eye-opener, kind of thinking that, because often some people might have the idea wrongly that in women's football there is not as much of an atmosphere as in men's football, that somehow like the kind of the sort of nastiness needs to be an integral part of an atmosphere. But that experience in particular showed me that that's definitely not the case, that you can have a brilliant atmosphere, a memorable atmosphere, without having those other elements that none of us probably want.
The differences are like, obviously, less swearing, all that kind of stuff. But I don't necessarily think that that's so bad. Like the men, I think, yes, homophobic, racism, all that kind of stuff, all these kind of, horrible things that we see. Of course, we don't want it in a women's game, and it's great that it's there, and it's great that everyone can feel included and together. But I just think that maybe the word's tribal. I think that I want it to matter as much. And sometimes I feel like I'm in the stadium and it's not because of anything, but I just feel like sometimes maybe it doesn't matter as much. Whereas, at a men's game, you play in Liverpool, it can be like, I know it's going to sound over the top, but it can be like life or death. You can see people like with their heads in their hands crying because it's, whereas The women's game, sometimes I feel they're like, oh, well, you know, it was a nice day out, and I don't want it to be like that. I want it to be like it matters. I mean, we're getting there slowly. But that's what I found at the start. But you know what? I did like how when I went to places like Lewes and Sheffield, I mean, I now go and follow Sheffield because they were just so welcoming. They were just so friendly. They were like, we don't matter that you're Man United. And I do like that. I do like that I can just pick up and go anywhere and go and watch a game. And if it's the next player there, I can sit and blend in. So I like that kind of thing. So I can understand why people maybe don't want it as home and away and so tribal, because if I say went to Lewes versus Sheffield, I would know where to sit. I want to sit in the middle because I just want to because I like people from both sides, you know what I mean?
I would hate for it to be exclusive. You know, it needs to continue to be a very inclusive space and welcoming space. Like there's a side to it where if you're closed-minded or racist or homophobic or something like that, you're instantly like excluded. Like, oh, you're not with us because you believe something that's against where this movement is going. And I think we need to be careful. Obviously, we don't agree with those mindsets, but that's still a person that's on a journey. And we need to be cognizant of like how to show care and love despite what people believe, right? Like instead of just writing someone off. I mean, I know that's like into a lot of bigger, different conversations, but I would love for this movement to be inclusive of everyone wherever they are on the journey.
I like Paul's warning. Keep it inclusive. Don't ordain who women's football is and isn't for. Make it welcoming for anyone in a way that men's football isn't. One aspect that currently attracts fans is the lack of aggression in the crowd, inside and outside stadiums. Matchday violence, or the possibility of it, has not gone away in the men's game. Fanny ALMERSSON is a PhD researcher in Sweden, currently attached to Hammarby.
In men's football in Sweden, we also have a lot of violence, and we've been struggling with that. And I think bringing that in women's football would definitely not be something we want to see happen. So I think we should leverage the fact that the fans might be slightly different. We might have some younger girls going to these games. They might be more family friendly. I think we need to leverage that opportunity.
Culturally, something changes in a football stadium when there is a significant number of female fans and children there. In fact, imagine if you can, a big crowd at a match where there are absolutely no adult male fans, just women, girls and boys. What would that be like? Are you thinking you'd miss the partisanship, the shouting, the singing, the electricity of two tribes pitted against each other? Well, you don't have to imagine it. It happened. Recently. 3 times, in fact. Inter-fan violence between Atlético Paranaense and Coritiba, 2 top men's teams in a southern state league in Brazil, led to both being ordered to play their first 3 matches against each other behind closed doors at the beginning of the 2023 season. On appeal, the authorities agreed that rather than no fans being present, the matches could go ahead as long as all male adult fans were excluded. The matches were women and children under 12 only. The first match at Coritiba attracted 9,000 women and children in the 40,000 capacity stadium. Not bad, you might think. But the second match saw a crowd of 32,000 and the third hit 37,000. And here's the thing. The atmospheres were loud, raucous, partisan, but joyful. Find a video online and see for yourself. This fan comment from Brazil Reports coverage is typical of how amazing the attendees felt. It says, "The experience of being just with women, without harassment and in a safe space, was unique. I haven't felt soccer this way in a long time." End quote. No one was hassling them. No one was staring at them. They could fully express themselves, and wow, did they. Now, there's a thought for International Women's Day each year. Matches that are women and children only? Here's Fanny ALMERSSON again.
Yeah, feeling safe and a sense of community. And those things might not be built in women might have different values than men when it comes to this, and we might value the safety more. But also the community building might be different. We had an interesting discussion yesterday during the conference I attended with Taylor Swift. And how she's also managing, while being very powerful and influential, she's also relatable. and that is what makes her fans to such a community. And I think we really need to think in that way of how we can build something similar for women's football by using our players, because I mean, when I've been going to the games, men's and women's games in Sweden, I can also see a difference in how the players are acting with their fans. The women's players, they are very engaging when it comes to building the fan experience. They are staying after the games to make autographs, take pictures. I know one player, she hurt her knee and couldn't play for a while. She went down and helped out with the coaching of the girls' academy. So I mean, all of these things I really think we need to leverage.
Usually, and happily, men do also go to women's matches. So what we see is always a generally diverse crowd, and what happens on a match day, how it feels, can then either amplify and encourage that, or unconsciously say to first-time fans that this place isn't for you. Everything needs to say welcome. Here's Jenny Haskell, Knowledge and Insights Lead at Deloitte's Sports Business Group.
I think when you take the best of sport, when you take the best of community, when you take the best of athlete stories, women's football is an incredible opportunity across all three. Right now, I think we need to optimize those platforms and continue to show the visibility of all of them to give opportunity for all different types of fans to enter. One of the things that I think right now, when you think about a safe space for diverse communities, women's football is really, an opportunity there. I think one of the things that's really starting to take hold is that conversation around that match day environment. So obviously, we start to see new environments with music, with activations, but also one of the things that'll be really interesting in the next few years, and again, going back to that test and learn culture, is the ticket pricing. In men's sports, tickets are normally a little bit higher. You can't necessarily bring your entire family. If you want to bring a family of 4, going to a women's football match is a bit more affordable than going to a men's football match. But does that put a ceiling on the ticket revenue, the match day revenue that women's football will be able to achieve? Potentially. So how do you continue to balance the opportunity that you have with a very diverse fan environment, but also with the revenues and the business aspect of it? So I think that's going to be, over the next few years, we'll start to see different iterations in different clubs and different, sports, taking a look at that type of model, while also keeping in the back of their minds that women's football and women's sport is generally more inclusive for all different communities. And how do we keep that at the heart of what women's sport is? Because I think that makes it really unique, and also allows different entrants across the board, which can only build fan engagement later on.
Bettina BAER takes the same view.
We do see as well that, let's say, the socio-demographics in terms of what values they hold or what they're looking for in their favorite sport is also a bit different when it comes to purpose and sustainability and inclusion. So we tested with what's important to them in surveys, and what they appreciate about the game of women's football. It is diversity, inclusion, some sort of progressive values as well when you compare to the men's football fan. Maybe it's also still evolving much, because when you look at data sets from 2-3 years ago, you also need to consider that when the visibility grew in women's football, a lot of the men's football fans came into the game. So you had the overall demographics was also largely driven by that. But now it seems like almost that this core group women's football fan is growing, and then there's new audiences coming to the game. So it's all still evolving, but still heavily driven, I would say, by the fact that clubs and rights holders relied as well, or the first audience segment and the biggest audience segments to tap into is the men's football fan that is moving over to women's football.
Bettina went on to talk about the different demographics of women's football so far observed.
I would say what a women's football fan is looking for is still great football and an entertainment football product, but we do see that rights holders are also engaging with them in different ways around the game day. So there is starting to be enriched by a more event type entertainment character that suits that audience as well. When we think about families, to have also family activations for kids. And another interesting part of that is as well that it seems like the women's football fans, or what we hear often from rights holders, they're more open to new ideas in the stadium. So a lot of rights holders are leveraging that as well. One specific example is a mascot, for example, is not the most popular thing in men's football. And we see different clubs now just trying and testing some of that, and it's actually well received. So a lot of the clubs and leagues and federations also have fun to rethink the game day and enrich it, because the audience is a bit different and it's better received or received differently.
So will it be possible to give both this new and potentially huge fan base the experience they want at a match, and also give the traditional men's football fan what they want too? We don't know yet. I've already witnessed for myself men complaining about new aspects of a match day, such as a live band or perhaps PA announcers who explain what regular matchgoers feel are the basics of being at a match. For example, where the food concessions are, stuff like that. Realistically, in the Venn diagram of traditional men's match fans and new women's match fans, there will be crossover. But if you believe that the biggest potential fan base is those people who have not traditionally seen football being for them, then you need to press on with the evolution of match day. You're not trying to exclude anyone, but neither are you diluting your innovations because some feel that's not what a match is supposed to be. Another different dynamic that is emerging about the new women's football fan is their club allegiance, or rather, potential lack of it. In men's football, it really is all about your club, about tribal belonging. I experience it myself, it's great. Of course, that happens in women's football too, but we are also seeing the emergence of the player-centric club hopper. Juan Bradley, long-time fan in men's and women's football, sees things going in this direction.
She would, for example, go to other clubs as well. So we've been to Crystal Palace quite a lot. But there's not that sense of this is one club that we have to always go to. For example, many men's clubs relying on fans to keep going, even if the experience isn't very good, even if the team isn't very good, because they have that sort of ingrained loyalty. Whereas in the women's game, there is this sense that if the experience isn't that good, if the team isn't playing that well, if the right players aren't there, people might just go elsewhere, particularly in a city like London, for example, where there are loads of different clubs to choose from, many quite easy to get to by public transport. I think that should probably be something that clubs should use to really get them to keep their fan experience central to their plans.
This disloyalty, as some traditional fans might see it, is really setting the cat among the pigeons. One particular report that covered this was the excellent Women's Football Fandom Insights report by She's a Baller, which dropped in 2024. It was full of brilliant insights, but one finding that seemed to get particularly debated on socials was this. 44% of women's football fans would support a different club or consider supporting a different club should their favourite player move. This kind of behaviour is taboo in the men's game. They're not real fans, was a common response. To me, this allegiance to players is A, a reality that's here to stay, and B, an almighty opportunity to redefine how women's teams market everything from match attendance to merchandise. Here's Helen Ward, a legendary player in the English-Welsh game and now general manager at Watford Women.
There are your hardcore fans that will be their club and their club only, and tribalism, like you said, just not to that the extent probably. I think you get more general women's football fans who will go to a game because it's on and not because of who's playing. And similarly, I think you'll get more fans that will follow a player as opposed to a team. So Alessia Russo, for example, you may find there were people that really liked Alessia Russo and they followed her and became Manchester United fans because she was there, but are now more likely to follow and support Arsenal because she's at Arsenal. And should she move on from Arsenal, may well go and become fans and sort of follow the player rather than the team. And again, you probably get the same with sort of Lionesses fans, for example. They'll support the Lionesses over and above everybody and go and then watch games that involve anybody that's got a Lioness in their team.
Jenny Haskell at Deloitte sees this as an opportunity too.
That's something that we're seeing, more broadly on the next generation of fans that follow athletes. But again, that's a perfect example of how do you optimize your athlete? And that probably sounds a bit harsher than I mean it. Like, how do you provide what you need for an athlete to tell their story and engage? If they're bringing a new following, how do you engage them into your club? And how do you bring these new followers into understanding what your club is, what it's about? So if they were to move on from, whatever club they're now at, would they still be fans of the club because of how you brought them into the community? I think there are athlete-driven communities now, and that's fantastic. But also how recognizing the power of these athletes as the power of the athlete continues to grow, both from, a commercial perspective, but now we're also seeing from an investment perspective and what they're beginning to do outside of just playing the game. That's going to be really important to understanding different types of fans and understanding how you can reach new fans in different markets as well.
Julian Hadwiger authored a really comprehensive piece of research about the future of women's football in Germany called Football But Better. Consulting 84 experts within the game from all different disciplines and levels, he came to some clear conclusions about fandom in the women's game.
When we look at exactly this fan growth, we also ask our experts, where are these people coming from? Are they current men's football fans who convert to women's football and so on? So basically we have this 2x2 matrix. And their overwhelming statement is that these are new fans because they're currently too young and they will be interested into women's football in the future, or fans who say, like, I don't want to have anything to do with men's football. All these crazy fans who have the bengalos and who basically have these fist fights in the stadium. Everything is violent. Everything is commercialized. I'm not attracted by that. But hey, this female athlete, she seems cool. Maybe she is more like a pop star, and maybe these new fans are more interested by the stories about by these new role models, and not only by the product on the pitch. So we do see a different target group here, and I think this makes it not a cannibalization of men's football, but extending the target group of football in itself. So men's football and women's football can be very complementary on that regard.
I think this is great news for football clubs. It says there's a whole new audience out there for your women's team that aren't already supporting your men's team. Culturally, it's good if your men's team supporters also follow your women's team, but business-wise, it's even better when you don't have to contend with cannibalising your existing fan base who only have a certain amount of leisure time and money to spend on you. Female players as pop stars may be something that makes traditional fans, traditional clubs wince, but my advice would be get over it, because it's the reality and the gateway to brand new customers. Here's Fanny ALMERSSON again.
Maybe the fan experience doesn't have to be exactly the same as it is going to a men's game, going to a women's game. I know that some people are talking about the difference as that men's football is like rock and women's football is like pop. And I think it's also true for Sweden.
In various episodes in this series, you're going to be hearing from MOYA DODD. I was so pleased to get her on, as her career in football is long and distinguished. As this is the first time we'll hear from her, I wanted to give her the right intro. So, look, as they say in Australia, here's a bit of her LinkedIn bio. MOYA was a former vice-captain of Australia's women's football team, the Matildas. She was one of the first women on FIFA's Executive Committee 2013 to 2016, served on Asian football's governing body for 12 years, 2007 to 19, and on the board of Football Federation Australia, 2007-17. She led the Women in FIFA campaign, resulting in gender reforms to the FIFA statutes. MOYA is currently secretary to the board of the Women's Leagues Forum.
Players have gone off and taken advantage of social media. They've built big profiles. They'll be selling you branded clothes or whatever. So, pop culture comes into it in a big way as well. I think in women's sport, not to say it doesn't in men's sport, but I think women footballers have been particularly good at cultivating their online brands. I mean, when Alex Morgan played for Spurs for a little while, I remember looking at the numbers, and she had millions of followers, and the club itself. I mean, she vastly outweighed the number of followers that the club itself had and the league itself had. You know, that's pretty extraordinary.
It works to get new fans and sponsors. Kieron O'Connor is the man behind the highly respected football business blog, The Swiss Ramble. He's seen how effective taking this approach is at first hand.
I have two teenage children. One is a daughter who has not really expressed any interest in men's football despite her father's constant encouragement, but does show interest in the women's game. I mean, she will rarely sit down and watch a full game, but she knows it, and she knows the players and the personalities, and she'll come and sit down next to me and say, "Oh, that's Viv," Miedema, for example, and so that I mean, okay, it's a small sample size of one, but it does show, I think, the potential reach of the women's game, that someone that was not interested in the men's game in the slightest actually recognises and understands and has some interest, not for the full sort of 90 minutes, but, in pockets.
And crucially, there is an appetite among sponsors too for the new audience that women's football is attracting. Irene MERINO is head of global gender balance at sports retailer DECATHLON.
So the consumers of women's football is different than men's football, which is great because that means that football is bigger. So thanks to football, we can attract more people. In my experience, I'm based in Madrid, so I usually go to Santiago Bernabeu, but I can see many kind of different consumers. You can have, it's like a show, big. You have always the old club. So people who go to the stadium since long with family. You can see also young people. But what is true is that it's very difficult for me, for example, as a mother with 2 kids and my husband. If I need to buy 4 tickets, it's impossible to go to the Bernabeu, and it's like 1,000 and a half. It's really expensive to go with your family, and it's the opposite in women football. You can really enjoy a very good match, for example, Real Madrid-Barcelona, and you can go with your family because it's accessible, because the environment is quite nice, so it's, I'm going to say, less aggressive. And I had the opportunity to join the champions in the Champions League, final Champions League in Bilbao. And the environment was really nice. A lot of families, a lot of people, I'm going to say between maybe 25, 35. So a lot of women enjoying football with gays sometimes. So I think the consumer is different, especially in terms of women and family.
Some countries, though, still seem some way from creating female football heroes. In France, I spoke to the founder of marketing agency Woman Up, Roland Giscard d'Estaing.
A question was asked recently about female women's sportswomen heroes in France. And guess what? Marie-Josée Pérec. She won the Olympics in 1992 and 1996. Second was Manodou, Laure Manodou, a swimmer. She won the Olympic in Athens, 2004. And another one was Gianni Longo. Gianni Longo is a cyclist, won a Tour de France. She's probably 60, bless her. She won the Tour de France 25 years ago. So there's no role models, and hardly anybody know a very famous football. I mean, even the football players that I know, women's football players, they had posters of Johan Niskens, Cruyff, Mustafa Daleb, or Safet Suzic or whatever, but males game. We need superstars, women superstars. And that's why I want to create a league, a really elitist league of superstars with really quality show entertainment and values with emerging from that will be superstars.
Focusing back on England again, Mark Bradley and Kieran O'Connor think there are several good examples of fan engagement.
Been a lot of countries in Western Europe, and I would say fan experience wise, the best is here in England. Possibly because it's commercialised and they're doing it for the reasons of getting more people through so we can have more money to spend. But whatever the motivation is, that the better experiences are here. West Ham were the first women's club to offer a first-time fan experiences for kids attending their first game. You know, Lewis's experience, particularly on the refreshment side, you know, has been phenomenal over the years. You know, Durham have brought this idea of how do you exist in a world that's very tribal in the Northeast with people's attitudes to football, and also with people not having much money to spend. And they were the first club to come up with just a little image that they put out on social media, which shows the total cost of going to a Durham women game. So not just the ticket cost, but the cost of the bus, the cost of a snack, something to eat, cost of a souvenir, a program, and they put it all together on this image that actually gets modernized as the seasons go by. But it's something that's really important. And they got under 300 people when they first played as a new club in 2013, and they're averaging over 1,000 now, which is much as that stadium can hold. I've seen Bristol City Women. They have the best travel guide I've ever seen on a website, and it actually recommends walking routes through Bristol. So you can do the one that takes you past the girl with the pearl earring. You can do seafaring history. You can do merchant history, whatever, and it's a brilliant idea. That whole organisation is, what they're trying to do, just with something as simple as travel.
Here's Kieran O'Connor talking about Arsenal.
If you look at what they did last season, they split their games between the stadium that they historically use, which is a very small stadium, Boreham Wood, and they averaged about 3,500 in half a dozen games or so there. But then they moved a similar amount of games to the Emirates, where they averaged 52,000. with a couple of games over 60,000. But they broke the WSL attendance record, I think, 4 times. And if you add those, so first of all, that shows the difference. Like, if you put it in a big stadium, then you can get a bigger crowd. But if you average those two, you get just shy of 30,000. And that last season was the 17th highest in all of football in England, including men's teams. It was higher than 7 Premier League clubs. So I mean, as I said, I'm an old guy, so I call this the field of dreams principle, where the tagline was, if you build it, he will come. So you can paraphrase that for the women's game and say, if you hold the games at the main stadium, then the fans will come. Now, that's not an automatic done deal. What you have to do is promote it really well, make sure people are aware of it, and promote it maybe to different fan bases. You don't get exactly, there's a crossover. There are fans like me that like men's football, women's football. There are others that only like women's football. But also hold the games at the right time, a sort of convenient date and a convenient time. But if you do all those good things, then, it's not a case of saying, well, this might happen. You can see with Arsenal, it does happen. It doesn't, they're probably the best example, and other clubs haven't maybe done it as well as them. But, the other leading clubs are beginning to do it. So United, City, Chelsea, they all moved games to main stadiums. They've all attracted big crowds.
Great marketing is a real leveller. In women's football, it means that a Bristol City can attract as many home fans as Manchester City.
A case like Bristol City, who I went to quite a lot because I lived there for quite a few years, they put a massive amount of effort into developing the fan experience at Ashton Gate. That season was the first season that they decided to play all their games at Ashton Gate, which is a big stadium. So they put in a lot of effort into thinking, okay, so what's the kind of sort of roadmap of the fan experience? When are people going to arrive? What are they going to expect? What are they going to do when they're kind of through the turnstiles? So, like a club like that, you'll get there's a really good bar, for example. There's often live music outside. There's really good food options inside. There's a now infamous game involving inflatable apples that are rolled down a pitch at halftime. So things like that, in many cases, don't cost a lot of money, but in many cases, clubs can make use of sponsorships as well.
If you want some more inspiration for your marketing, you could take a look at Brann in Norway.
They're in Bergen on the west coast of Norway. Brann took Barcelona all the way in the quarterfinals of the Champions League this year. So that was a huge achievement for a Norwegian team. But some of the things they do up there is that they really focus on kids. So they have a large bank, financial organisation, that sponsors the league and sponsors the clubs. So that money effectively goes into the fan experience in a way that really impacts on what that family gets or what that fan gets. So Brann have an enormous family fan zone, and it's a fantastic destination an hour and a half before the game. They also did something else which I thought really, really lifted the experience, and that is that every player in the Norwegian top series and in that top tier is issued with a photograph card with space for an autograph. Each player has their own massive stack, and at the end of every game, one or two of the players, after a 10-minute, warm down, will actually come across into a pre-prepared area, to offer those autographs and those pictures.
I think there's actually potentially another way in which the new women's football fans may not be that loyal. Your stadium experience. I say stadium, but I'll be honest, at some grounds you visit, the facilities are, shall we say, basic. They're safe, they're fine, but not that inviting for a day out, which is, after all, what you're offering people. If your mate said, let's go to the Red Lion pub, you'll go. But if when you get there, the toilets aren't great, the food is distinctly average, the service is terrible and the staff don't seem that bothered, then will you go back again? Or will you suggest to your mates that next time you should try out the Black Horse pub instead? Many men's stadiums may take their fans for granted, knowing they'll come again next week no matter what, but beware making that assumption in the women's game. The new fans may only go to, say, 3 or 4 matches a season, and you want that to be your matches, not the club over in the next town. I think the most vital connection of all for fans is with the players, their players at their club. There is an interaction that still happens at most women's matches, which is one of the essences of the women's game. This is something which Lee Sanders at Durham is really proud of.
I think the players as well, they do a hell of a lot with the spectators, and the win, lose, or draw, rain, shine, doesn't matter. They will stand out, they will sign autographs, and they'll get pictures of the kids. And sometimes, that's they're hurting because they've just lost the game. And, the sports people that who elite athletes, they will put on a brave face, they'll walk over and they'll go and speak. I look at when we hosted Manchester City in the FA Cup in January, and Chloe Kelly was exceptional, to be fair to her. She stuck out till the very end. She was freezing cold, we had to give her a jacket and everything. It was all day, but she genuinely was brilliant.
Away from the stadiums, how about women's football on TV and the internet? How much do we know yet if new women's football fans will watch and whether they'll pay to do so too? Here's Jenny Haskell again.
Again, I'll go back to the visibility and storytelling of women's sport. I think that's a really crucial factor when it comes to broadcast, and something we're starting to see take hold more and more, of really telling the stories of the incredible women athletes that are competing at the moment. I think when you think about that pay TV versus free to air, I think there is somewhat of a balance, because obviously the free to air gets you a lot more eyes, it gets you that visibility angle. Hopefully will drive a lot more fans to the pay TV platform. I think right now, as you're starting to build what I think more so even within women's sport is a community of fans across a following of women's sport and women's football in particular, it's really important to understand, A, that the quality of production is there. And so how do you optimize that quality that makes people want to watch? And I think part of that is really, obviously, investment is one thing, but really ensuring that you have maybe a different setup than the men's game, but really, talking about structures and talking about having, pundits, diversity of thought, et cetera, that really circle around the women's game and give you that full storytelling environment around a game or a match or anything like that. So one of the things that I think we have to focus on is, what is the propensity of fans to pay for a pay TV platform that might already have men's football on it? How do you delineate whether they're just there for women's football or whether they're there already for men's football, etc., or what is their propensity to pay in addition to. One of the things that I think is really interesting, will fans, watch women's football on TV, etc. When you think about the United States and this franchise model, I don't know if you've heard of the Sports Bra, which is a bar that only shows women's sport, and the success that that's had. Women's sports fans are very communal. They are, they love to watch together, talk together, etc. So how do you optimize the community aspect of it with the visibility aspect of it and the production quality that ensures that people want to watch?
Guess how many men's matches Sky already shows, Premier League and Championship, in the UK? 1,274. That makes scheduling women's matches challenging. Kieran O'Connor thinks a dedicated regular broadcasting slot would help.
This is a key point, and we know from the figures that when a televised women's game clashes with a men's game, unsurprisingly, the viewership reduces. And this was something that was emphasised in Karen Carney's review, where she said one of the things we should push for in the women's game is a dedicated broadcast slot. And I think the suggestion was to go for the Holy of Holies, i.e. 3 p.m. on a Saturday, because that's a sort of free slot. And it would make a lot of sense because you get this dedicated slot. People are creatures of routine, or at least I know I am. So if you sort of get accustomed to sort of, having that available, and you don't have any sort of competition from a men's game, at least on TV, then I think that would be helpful.
It also matters what women's matches you show. In men's football, the so-called big clubs get more than their fair share of coverage. This drives viewer numbers and hence advertising slot values. It's probably true also that these bigger clubs are more of a draw for fans generally to watch, but that won't necessarily be true of women's matches. I asked superfan Natalie Burrell what she made of the current state of women's matches on TV.
Even on the TV, it's boring now. For example, there'll be a game and it'll be Spurs versus Villa and it'll be, I know it's thingy, but you'll think that's more exciting than they'll put on Chelsea versus Bristol. And I know what Chelsea versus Bristol is going to end up as. And I just think that there's no one really holding the TV. Obviously, the TV company are going to do what they want. But I think especially I was around when it first was coming in that they were going to put on TV and they made all these grand promises and, we won't do this, we won't do that. But TV is just doing what it's doing, and I remember they had that 6:45. Oh, we won't put. This is from a fan's point. They said, they'll make sure that Man United versus Brighton. They won't make you travel down that far on Sunday night or Saturday morning at 12 o'clock. Won't be it's not going to be like the men's game. Of course it is. They're not bothered. They're just about getting it. That's what's going to lead. And then no one's been there to step in and say, well, that I know, no one's been there to really push back and say, actually, you're taking the mick. Why are you not showing? Why is it not, if all, like you're saying, there's all these mandatory, why is that mandatory not on Sky? You've got to show everyone at least 5 times. Because, Reading going on telly 5, 6, 7 times would have been better than, because I don't know how they divvy up the money for the telly and stuff. But that's, this is how I see it, because you never see West Ham, you never see Villa, but you see Chelsea every week on telly, and good for Chelsea, good for United. If I'm a fan, I can't make it, good for me. But like you say, you don't want to see it's happening in the Championship because you just think that when the Championship goes, what are we doing, what are we standing on? Because the whole thing of football, English football that I know is promotion, relegation, and a strong second tier. That's what you want to see: a strong first tier, strong second tier, third tier, so on and so on. And I doubt that money's trickling down from Chelsea, Arsenal, who are on telly every week. Of course it's not. For me, I think like a Newco and a FA should be doing a lot more. Well, they're going to have to now because a lot of people are not surviving and it's going in the papers. And what's anyone going to do about it? I don't know. Probably nothing. And it's just going to happen and tough.
TV viewing habits is yet another area where women are not small men. Assumptions from the men's game won't work because the motivation and needs of the new women's fans are not the same as in men's football. For example, perhaps a new women's football fan might spend 10 to 30 minutes watching some football content, perhaps a mixture of match highlights and player profiles, as well as those who might still watch a whole 2-hour match experience. One thing that fans of both men's and women's football talk about is competitiveness, the sense that when two teams play, the outcome is as unpredictable as possible. when the league kicks off, there are several teams in with a shout of winning the title, or when a women's championship team gets promoted to the WSL, they don't become a whipping boy or girl for the established teams. Here's women's fan Juan again.
My concern would also be the gap between the Women's Championship and the Women's National League. If there is a kind of cut-off in resources between one league and the other, that kind of natural pathway of progression for many clubs with massive ambitions in the National League simply not being able to get a foothold in the Championship. If we focus too much on the top two leagues because they are professional at the expense of the leagues lower down the pyramid, then we could have a situation where getting closer to what we have, for example, in the Premier League, where we're getting an increasingly separate division from the lower tiers of the men's football pyramid, with clubs not being able to compete coming up from the Championship.
And even Natalie, a staunch Man United fan, worries about too many easy games.
Because even at the bottom of the WSL, sometimes it's done before Christmas and it's boring. You're looking at Chelsea in the league, good for Chelsea, but it's boring for, say, there's a time where, it could be at a bit of jeopardy. So I think 2 up, 2 down, that's what we need.
In the women's game, fan numbers are growing in the more developed markets. Many would say that fans are the lifeblood of the game. But, in the majority of countries in the world, women's football is still at a more basic level and matches happen in almost empty stadiums. Anjali Shah, founder and CEO of the Indian Women's Football Alliance, told me that attracting fans there is still very challenging. So I asked her how that affected players.
Not having a single fan in the stadium doesn't deter the girls at all. Absolutely not. I think sports fans and football fans is a new concept in India. Not all over India. Of course, there are pockets in India where they are hysterical about football, like in Kolkata in India, like 100,000 people watching an open derby. Okay. But these instances are very few and far in between in the country. And especially for women's football, you will not see those kind of numbers in India.
Episode 4 looks at women's football around the world, and you'll hear Anjali and many other inspirational women explain the daily struggles they face. When it comes to fans, I used to repeat that Jock Stein quote constantly. You know the one. Football is nothing without fans. But since doing these interviews, I've changed my mind. Of course it would be a weird game without fans. We only need to think back to those closed games during the pandemic. But in this new, re-emerging women's game, I'm now of those people who say, as we build the game, there is one group who are even more important than the fans. The players. The final word of this episode goes to Sue Campbell.
Women's football should feel like it's the right of every woman and every girl if they want to do it. And it's the right of every woman and every girl, whether they wish to play recreationally, whether they wish to play on a Saturday competitively with their friends and have a wonderful time, or whether they wish to be the very best that they can be and go up that talent pathway and represent a club and possibly the Lionesses. So our job at the FA is to make those pathways possible and to make that opportunity possible. The top of the game has to be a place that any youngster can aspire to get to. So who is the game for? Number one, it's for the players. That's all we're in it for. Number two, coaches. Beyond that, all those support staff, whether it's welfare or safeguarding or physical conditioning, all of those people matter. But number one, you have to have a player-centred approach. And again, going back to UK sport, one of the things I did was I changed the funding regime completely from a plan-based system to an athlete-centred system. You have to have a player-centred approach. And if you take a player-centred approach, you make very different decisions than if you make a club-based approach or even an England-based approach. Because the welfare of those players is everybody's business. Whether whatever club they're in, whatever England team they're in, we should all care. We should all care that we're giving them the best possible chance to succeed. So the game is for the players. Number one, for the players.
So, the next episode focuses on the players. their development, their coaching, their dreams, and the reality for most.
Not Small Men is a Good Intent Media production.